Hi there. Welcome to Conversations for Yoga Teachers. I'm your host, Karen Fabian, and this is episode 314. We are going into the 300s. I'm just so excited and so happy to come on here and record these episodes every single week, even holiday weeks, like no days off over here. And it's really because I just love sharing with you, the listener, all things yoga teaching, mindset, manifestation, anatomy, teaching skills, cueing, sequencing, all of it. And today I'm here not just on the audio version of my podcast, but also the video version. So if you're watching on YouTube, hi there. If you're listening on whatever platform you listen to the show on, hello as well. I wanted to start out as I'm speaking here about the fact that now I have an a visual version of the show on YouTube. I wanted to just share with you. I read an article about Stephen Bartlett, who is the founder and host of Diary of a CEO podcast, which is one of the most popular podcasts in the world. And I read an article recently about him and how he started his podcast with really low expectations for it. And it grew and grew and grew into what it is today, which is, as I said, one of the most listened to and watched podcasts in the world. And what he was talking about that really gave his podcast a bump was adding the visual, adding the video version of the show. And he was speaking about podcasting as not just an audio piece of content, and that when he added video, it really expanded his reach. And so that was one of the things that inspired me to add video. Plus, on YouTube, which is owned by Google, people can now find my show. So if a yoga teacher goes on YouTube and searches how to share anatomy in their cues, in my cues, my show will pop up because I have many episodes about that, along with other search queries they could put in. So I'm excited to be on YouTube. If you want to watch the show on YouTube, you can find the link to my YouTube channel just by going on YouTube and putting in Karen Fabian or Bare Bones Yoga. I think the easiest way, though, to find my YouTube channel is to just go to my website, which is barebonesyoga.com, and you'll see a link right on the homepage for my YouTube channel. So having said that, let's kick off today's episode. So the first thing I wanted to share is, over the past couple of weeks, it's been really interesting. If you listen to the show last week, I shared a little bit of, not a revelation, I shared a little bit of what's been going on in my mind over the past couple of weeks as I head towards my 60th birthday on September 29th. And I've been having some questions, some thoughts, some intuitive pulls to really examine the direction I'm going in terms of what I do. And some of that is really driven by the number of teachers I've enrolled in my program over the past year and a half, 2 years. And it's been lower than what I want. And it's not about the money, it's about the impact, because every single teacher who enrolls in my program, for the most part, the teachers who do the work, the teachers who apply themselves, get amazing results. And I want to get that outcome for many teachers. And so that's been kind of behind my questioning, like, do I really have an offer that yoga teachers want? And I don't want to go into the whole background of it again. I went into it in great detail in the last episode, which is 313. And so as I've been kind of thinking about where I'm going, what I'm doing, how can I be most useful in the world, I ironically started to get some continuing education opportunities ways to grow my own knowledge, things that are really interesting to me that up until now, I really haven't had the time to explore. And so I have been investing over the past 2 weeks, both my money and my time in my personal growth in the area of yoga teaching. So these are not outside yoga. This is not entrepreneurial things. I mean, in the past year and a half, I invested $20,000 in an entrepreneurial program. It was an amazing program. I learned a lot. I shaped my business in ways I would not have been able to shape it without working with this particular husband and wife duo who own their own online business, and they have a very successful program training entrepreneurs as to their methodology. And so that was a really good investment. It was really necessary for me to set me up with a process that I can use every single day that covers both outreach to people, growing my community, and lots of other things. So now that I'm done with that program, I have the time in my schedule to take on my own growth as a teacher. And so my question to you is, what are you doing right now to grow as a teacher? What are you investing your money in? What are you investing your time in? What results do you want that you're not getting now? Because if you're not growing, then what are you doing? Right? You're stagnant. You're staying in this one place. And I'll share with you along these lines an interesting conversation I had the other day with a teacher. She had contacted me on Instagram because she saw one of my posts on anatomy. And I started a conversation with her in the DMs about where she's at right now as a teacher. What is she looking for? What would learning anatomy help her do that she can't do now? And what I uncovered, and this is always why, when I don't do this, I kick myself. But when I do this, it's so important. And it just reiterates to me how important it is. When I hear from somebody on Instagram and I get in a conversation with them, it's so important that I understand where this person is as a yoga teacher. Where are they? What are they doing? And I don't mean physically where they live. I mean, where are they kind of in the continuum of being a yoga teacher? Are they in 200-hour training? Are they teaching weekly classes? Have they completed a 200-hour training, but they're not teaching? In the case of this teacher, she had completed a 200-hour, she was teaching, she was taking a 300-hour. The interesting thing, though, was that she said to me she had completed the 300-hour over a year ago. And what was left was to record a series of classes as part of her final practicum. And she didn't do that, or hadn't done it, because she didn't like how she looked on video. And I want to really point this out because I have heard from other teachers as well that this final stage of an online program, a 200 or 300-hour, to tape yourself teaching becomes a pretty significant barrier to completion. And I want you to think about, if this is something you can relate to, I want you to think about, or just think about it generally when it comes to procrastination. Here's a teacher who invested thousands of dollars, presumably, at least hundreds, if not thousands of dollars, in a training that now sits uncompleted because of a perception that, in this case, this person doesn't like the way she looks on video. And so that training is sitting out there now incomplete after the time was invested, after the money was invested. And I'm not judging this person. It's just that I want to bring this up to you because, number one, if you can directly relate to this, we should talk, because I want to help you get over this perceived hump so that, obviously, so that you can be done with this training and then move forward. Right? I mean, it doesn't make any sense to invest time and money in a training and then not actually complete it. That does not make sense. This points out, though, another factor that I want to bring up with you, which is what I hear all the time, which is that teachers oftentimes sign up for hours-based training simply because they believe that's what they need to do, or that's what they should do. And in fact, you don't need to do that. You can take a 200-hour training. I actually do believe in the value of getting that 200-hour training as a basic training. Beyond that, though, there's no need for you. You don't need anybody's permission to say to yourself, you know what, 200 hours is fine with me. From this point forward, I'm going to take workshops, specialty training, specialty programs that specifically are set up to get me the results I want, rather than just sort of doing this rote, oh, well, everybody tells me I need to now get 300 hours or I need to now get 500 hours. Your students do not know anything about Yoga Alliance, nothing about the hours-based system. What they do know is whether or not you come into class and you know what you're doing and you're confident and you're walking around the room and you're seeing them and you're assisting them and you're providing reasonable modifications. Like, those are the things that your students see and appreciate. And those skills can be learned in a variety of different ways. And honestly, if you knee-jerk response and sign up for an hours-based program and it doesn't cover what you need to know, then why are you spending your time and money there? Like in the case of this person, she contacted me on Instagram because she has an anatomy learning gap. She knows she doesn't understand anatomy. And she took a 300-hour training that had nothing to do with anatomy. So now she's out the time, out the money, hasn't even finished the program, and she still has a problem around understanding anatomy. So this is what I mean. And I'm speaking plainly with you because I want to save you time and money, and I want to help you get the results you want. So that's that piece there. You know, really just asking you, what are you doing right now to invest in your growth? Like right now, have you done an assessment of results you want, of learning you know would be important for you to gain? Like, what are you doing right now on that? Because, you know, we're heading into October, the last quarter of the year. This is the final push to really end the year on a high note. And that's certainly something I'm taking very seriously. And I just wonder kind of where you're at. In terms of the next thing, and I always have, just so you know, if you're watching, I always have a little index card with my structure for the conversation we're having today. So I'm not just willy-nilly winging it here. And if you've been listening to the show for a while, you know that I have a format because I sort of refer to it as we're going through. So the next thing I have on my list here is events and workshops. And if you've been a longtime listener of the show, or if you're someone that's on my mailing list, you get invitations to my workshops that I hold on Zoom. And I do that because I like people to be able to ask questions. And when I do workshops on Instagram, it's not easy for people to ask questions because they have to type them in. I've said over the past couple of months, I'm sort of backing off doing workshops on Zoom because I find that attendance has not been good. I get people that sign up and then people don't show up. And again, I'm not judging. It's just that, you know, for me to carve out the time in my schedule to then not have people show up doesn't make sense. And I'm curious as to, well, I don't want to get into the whole kind of marketing piece about why people sign up for stuff and don't show up. That's a whole separate conversation that really lives in the marketing world, because it's really about what are you offering people so that when they see it, they make it a priority to show up, right? And are you actually sharing it with the ideal person who wants this information? And those are questions that live in the marketing world. What I have done and what I wanted to share with you is that I primarily do workshops right now on Instagram. And if you've never been on my Instagram and you're a yoga teacher, I'm assuming you are because you're listening to my show, you're definitely missing out, because I'm doing quality workshop content on a platform that's known for short form video. Instagram is known for videos that are 90 seconds or less. I'm going on Instagram and I'm doing 15-minute, 20-minute, 30-minute, 45-minute workshops where you're getting high level quality content around how to build a sequence with a peak pose, how to share yoga philosophy in your classes, how to share anatomy in your cues, how to build a framework so you can go into class and know what kind of cues to use. Lots of different high-level topics. So I wanted to let you know that in terms of workshops, you don't need to sign up for anything. You don't need to put anything on your schedule. All you need to do is connect with me on Instagram, Bare Bones Yoga. And if you're a new connection to my Instagram page, go to the little video section. When you go to my profile, you'll see across the top, you can click videos. That will bring you to all the videos I have. Some of them are reels, which are 60 seconds or 90 seconds. Some of them are these workshops, and you can watch them. And I mean, geez, you could probably spend a couple of hours and get high-level quality teacher education just by watching my Instagram. So if you've been at my workshops in the past and you've wondered, why isn't she doing workshops anymore? That's a little bit of the marketing rationale I have right now. I do want to do some sort of summit or online conference or online workshop before the year is done. So I will be doing something. Right now, I'm doing kind of short form / longer form workshop content on Instagram. So that's there for you. The next thing I wanted to share is a light bulb moment. If you're new to my show, light bulb moments are just a segment I do where I talk about a realization that a yoga teacher had that I work with in my program. And you've probably had a light bulb moment as a yoga teacher, something you've realized about anatomy or about teaching or about applying anatomy to your cues or speaking from the heart. You've had some sort of challenge that you've put yourself out there. You've experimented with maybe a new way of showing up in your classes. You've had a good experience and a revelation has come as part of it. And oftentimes light bulb moments come from busting beliefs we have about ourselves, busting a negative belief we have about something, like the yoga teacher who thinks if she teaches the same sequence over and over and over again so that she can really get to learn it super well, so that she can go in and feel confident and be able to walk around the room and not have to practice with her class. But she has this belief that her students will be bored if she teaches the same sequence over and over again. She experiments with teaching a similar sequence from class to class for a month. And by the end of that month, not only is she more confident, but she realizes no one has said boo. No one has said anything. Class numbers have been exactly the same, and there's been absolutely no impact. And she's busted this negative belief or perception she had that students would get bored. So she's had this light bulb moment, this aha moment, like, oh my God, I can't believe I made such a big deal out of this. And in actuality, what's happened is the complete opposite. Nobody has said anything to me. Nobody's gotten bored. My class numbers have stayed the same, if not grown. And the most important thing is I now know my sequence so well, I'm unconsciously competent with respect to teaching that. I can go in the room. I don't need notes. I don't get nervous. I don't have mind going blank syndrome. So that's an example. I wanted to share with you an example of a light bulb moment I had many years ago, but it still sticks with me to this day. And I find that interesting because there are some memories I have that, and this is super common, this has nothing to do with age, that just go away. Like for instance, in October, I'm going to be taking a trip to Paris. I'm so excited. And I've been to Paris before. I was in Paris probably 20 years ago. I have no memory of being in Paris. I remember I was in London and I took the train to get there. I remember being by myself on a business trip to London. I took the train to Paris. I have no memory. It's so strange, and it's a little disconcerting that I have absolutely no memory of being in another country. So the fact that I have a memory of this light bulb moment that I experienced just demonstrates how impactful it was to me. So I'll just quickly tell you what the story is. I remember when I was teaching a class, and I remember the studio I was in. I don't remember what the student looked like, but I remember the class. It was my 4:30 or my 4 o'clock class on Fridays. And I used the cue in downward dog, roll the inner eyes of your elbows forward. And after class, this woman came up to me and she said, "Why did you share that cue? I've never heard that cue before." And so I explained to her the shoulder position in downward dog, that the shoulders were in flexion and external rotation. I went on to explain that the muscles that create external rotation are on the back of the body. They connect the scapula to the humerus. Their names are the infraspinatus and the teres minor. And when they contract, they create that external rotation. And I had her come into downward dog and I did a little demo with her. I externally rotated her humerus so that she could notice the shoulder external rotation. And I compared it to internally rotating in downward dog. And I had her do a little demo of that. And she immediately could feel that was not right. Like she didn't want to be internally rotating in that pose. And so after this conversation and quick demo we did, she stood up and she said to me, "Karen, I will never, ever forget this conversation we had and how it's going to help me do downward dog for the whole rest of my life." And so in that light bulb moment experience, not just for her, was a light bulb moment experience for me, that I realized how important it is for me to use cues that I can explain, for me to use cues that I understand the why, the reason for them. And I also in that moment had that light bulb above my head telling me, "Karen, you are doing exactly what you were built to do, what you were designed to do. You are in your Dharma." So that's just a quick story about a light bulb moment. And for you as a yoga teacher, this may give you, I don't know if you can relate to this or if this gives you some inspiration to do the work that maybe you need to do so that you can truly understand anatomy and experience light bulb moments like this, and to see that these are the kinds of impacts that you can make on your students just in these quick conversations that come from what you're doing in your class, what you're saying, what you're teaching, how you're putting your sequence together, what you're saying in your cues, what information are you sharing. All of those things combined create an opportunity for your students. So the next thing I wanted to share with you, and the next segment that I typically go into, is a mindset minute. And I think I may have brought this up last week. It's just that I wanted to share it again because I got a little bit of additional traction around this concept in a post I did on my Instagram about it. And it has to do with this idea of, if you've ever experienced somebody giving you negative feedback, maybe not even directly, although maybe you perceive, like, let's say somebody leaves your class early and they don't say anything, but you take it to heart that it's a reflection on you as a teacher. They didn't like my class, they left class early. Or maybe you hear from the studio manager that one of the people in your class gave some negative feedback about you to the studio manager. Or maybe somebody actually comes up to you after class and directly says to you, I mean, I don't know actually who would do this, but maybe in some way you either perceived or you heard through the grapevine, or somehow you perceive that someone had a negative perception about you as a teacher, or something you did in your classes they didn't agree with. If you can go into your mind, and believe me, if you've had an experience like this, you won't have to go too far because these experiences are usually front of mind. And if you feel like it's still holding you back from being the kind of teacher you want to be, maybe you feel like you remember this person's feedback and you really took it to heart. Maybe it's something that is truly holding you back from really doing the things you want to do as a teacher, because you always have this tape running in the back of your mind about what this person said. I want to just come on here and give you permission, not that you need it from me and not that you even need it, but I want to give you permission to let it go. Let it go. One person's perception of your class literally means nothing. All it means is the perception of that person is what it is. And if you make it a story, you'll never let it go. And in all of the holding on to that story that you will do, all you'll do is not only cause yourself stress and doubting, you'll also hold yourself back from helping the students that you're teaching. I've had teachers tell me they still hear that person's feedback in their mind when they're teaching their current classes. So, this, I don't want to say it's a form of trauma, but this is just an example of how we can take things so personally. And I can remember there's a wonderful book called The Four Agreements. And one of the four agreements is something about, don't take things personally. Matter of fact, I think that's literally what it is. And it goes on to talk about how most of the time when we get negative feedback, it has very little to do with us and a lot to do with the person. That person that comes to your class that doesn't enjoy it, maybe they're having a bad day. Maybe they just lost somebody important in their life. Maybe they just lost their job. Maybe they're in a really bad state and they're taking it out on you. Or maybe their perception of the world is influenced by where they are right now in their own life. And so if they came on a different day and a different time, maybe they would love the class. And again, it doesn't really matter, because we shouldn't be tying our worth as a teacher to our students' experience, even though that sounds a little crazy, because of course we want people to come to our classes and of course we want them to like it. But we have to keep in mind that we can't control how people think. And I have talked about this many times on the show, so I don't want to necessarily go into it in great detail. So I'll just leave it at that. If this is something that you're experiencing right now, I highly, highly encourage you to send me a DM on Instagram. Let's talk about it. I'd love to help you move past this. And I'm sure you know by now, but my Instagram is Bare Bones Yoga. Okay. So what I wanted to share with you today, kind of the heart of the matter here of today's episode, is a couple of different topics. And I came up with these topics, not myself. I actually participated, and this is one of the investments I made in myself in terms of my own growth. I invested in, and it wasn't a big investment, although it was in terms of time, because it was an all-day online summit for yoga teachers. And the topic was, what is the future of the yoga industry? And I was really intrigued by the topic because I'm having questions myself about what is my future as a yoga teacher? What is the best contribution I can make? And this was where the universe, I was kind of chuckling, was playing kind of tricks on me, because as I've been having over the past couple of weeks, these questions about my own direction of where I'm going as a teacher, in came this invite. And I saw the topic and I thought, oh, this is perfect right now. This is the conversation I want to be part of. So when I went to this online conference, there were probably about 50 people, yoga teachers, online at this virtual summit, and they were from all over the world. So it was really interesting to hear in the beginning, and people kind of did a little bit of a roll call. You could see the comments of where people were dialing in from, and all over the globe. And so the first thing that said to me, and I've had teachers all over the world enroll in my program, and the thing that always amazes me is everybody really faces a lot of the same challenges, regardless of where they took their training, regardless of where they live, regardless of where they teach. So I find that interesting. And so when I was at this summit, one of the first things we did was they had this virtual whiteboarding exercise, and everybody went into this online whiteboard and used these virtual Post-it notes to answer questions, so that at the beginning of the summit, the two facilitators, who are yoga teachers, could get an assessment of what kinds of topics do people want to learn more about. And I was participating, and I was also watching what people were writing, because from my own experience and knowledge and growth of my own business and serving yoga teachers and helping yoga teachers, I was really curious as to what were people going to say. Because again, part of what I'm questioning is, am I offering something that is of interest to yoga teachers? And I don't want to go into all that again. I obviously talked about it last episode and at the beginning of this show. So I'm just going to give you a quick overview of the kinds of things that yoga teachers at this summit said they wanted to learn more about. And I want you to put the hat on your head of, as you're listening to this list, are these things that I care about? Are these things that I want to learn more about? So I'll tell you quickly what things came up. The first thing that came up, and this was a very popular topic amongst the participants, is how to teach yoga beyond the poses. How to teach yoga beyond the poses. And what this translated to was more than just going in and teaching the postures. I want to teach something more. And typically what that means is I want to share more about yoga, yoga philosophy, the application of yoga philosophy to modern day life, things like that. Next thing, practical business strategies and tools. I found this very curious because not only is this a topic that I could speak on for days and days, I wrote an entire book on the business of being a yoga teacher. I don't really hear a lot of this questioning from yoga teachers that I speak to. I don't hear a lot of questions about how do I leave my full-time job to be a yoga teacher? How do I take on more classes? How do I charge for privates? How do I grow as a yoga teacher with respect to the business opportunities I have? So that was interesting to me. The next thing that came up is there was a question around what impact do you want to have as a yoga teacher? And one thing that came up that I actually thought was really interesting was how I want to know how to make yoga part of aging gracefully. And I think this is a really cool topic, especially because of late, definitely on TikTok, definitely on Instagram, there is so much more talk around menopause, perimenopause, menopause, and postmenopause, and the hormonal impacts on women, bringing this topic out of the depths, out of the closet and into the open, talking openly about it. And then a lot of physicians, actually aren't a lot, but the physicians who do, like Dr. Mary Claire Haber is one of them. She's written some amazing books. They talk about the emphasis on mindfulness techniques, on yoga, on weight bearing. And these things all address decreasing cortisol levels, increasing bone density. So these are things where yoga, mindfulness, pranayama, deep breathing exercises all have a role in aging gracefully. So that was a topic that came up. There's certainly tons of opportunities for yoga teachers to specialize in that area and to offer things in that area. The other thing that came up in terms of what impact do you want to have is, again, how to bring more yoga philosophy into my classes. So I'm curious if any of these things are hitting home for you. There was a question around what fears or obstacles stand in your way. One thing that came up over and over again was financial. I have financial fears about, am I making enough money teaching yoga so that it could eventually be something that I do full time? Or even if I'm not interested in leaving my job to teach yoga full time, am I really getting paid my worth? Another thing that came up, again, that I totally get and I found interesting was fears around having to compete with other yoga teachers in the online space, what people called yoga teacher influencers. And there wasn't a lot of detail. I can assume what this means is I'm a yoga teacher, I'm scrolling through Instagram, I see some person on Instagram who's a yoga teacher as well. I check this person's profile. They have 250,000 followers. I start to feel inadequate. I start to feel jealous. I start to feel like, who am I to be out there as a yoga teacher when this person is there and has 250,000 followers? She must be making so much money. She must be so flexible. She's so young, younger than me. Like, I get it, right? I get these are the things that come up. So I don't want to go into too much detail on that one, but that's what that one's about. And yeah, the other thing that came up that I thought was interesting, and this topic is forever coming up, is the idea of what was described as an ethical yoga salary. And I find this so interesting because this theme will not go away. People continue to have a belief that there's a conflict between being a yoga teacher and making money and teaching yoga. And again, I'm not here in this episode to take a deep dive on any one of these topics. I'll just say that that is a belief. That is not a fact. That is a belief. I'm not saying if you hold a belief along the lines of it's wrong to take money for classes I'm teaching. I'm not saying you're right or wrong. Beliefs are not right or wrong binary type things. They are constructs, mental concepts and constructs that we hold that, if we are willing, deserve to be explored in service to our personal growth. I think that was pretty much it. Yeah, I think that was pretty much it. So what I wanted to do today is I wanted to speak a little bit more only about one of the topics. And before I go into that, I really want to encourage you. Any of the topics that I just shared, if they are interesting to you, please send me a DM on Instagram and tell me the topic. I know you're probably listening to this episode on your phone. You can literally go to my Instagram right now, continue to listen to the episode, and send me a DM. So do it right now. Go to Instagram, go to Bare Bones Yoga, go to my DM section, send me a DM, and just tell me the topic that interests you most, because I can use that as a springboard for, depending on how many DMs I get, what workshops to do going forward. The thing that I wanted to talk about just briefly, and this is something I'm probably going to do a workshop on, to go into more depth, because it really deserves a more in-depth conversation, is this idea of bringing yoga philosophy into your classes. I think for a lot of yoga teachers, the reason they hesitate to do this is because they don't feel like they're qualified. I want you to appreciate, like, there are scholars out there who have their PhD in yoga philosophy and related topics, but that doesn't mean you have to be a scholar in order to share yoga philosophy in your classes. So if you're listening to this and you're hesitating on sharing sharing yoga philosophy in your classes because you don't feel you know enough, or you don't feel you're worthy, or you don't feel you're qualified, I encourage you to loosen your attachment to that belief, because holding on to that belief is only holding you back from serving your students in a way that it sounds like you want to serve them. So that's number one. Number two, yoga philosophy, like anatomy, is a huge subject, and it has a lot of different areas. If we just look at some of the fundamental components of yoga philosophy, we come up with things like the Bhagavad Gita, the yamas and niyamas, the 8 limbs of yoga, let's see, the Yoga Sutras, right? There are several different, the Upanishads, there are several different classical yoga texts, Autobiography of a Yogi, right? That we can look at if we were to make a list of what are the fundamental texts of yoga and concepts in yoga, several of which are, of course, contained in the texts. What would we come up with? Now, to then look at that list and think, I need to bring all of that into my class, that's not what we're asking ourselves to do. So the first thing I want you to think about is, number one, what's inspiring me to want to bring yoga philosophy into my classes in the first place? Because if you're doing it because you think you have to, that's not a good reason to do it. You want to be sharing yoga philosophy in your classes because you feel called to do it. So what is the inspiration? That's number one question to answer for yourself. The next thing is, what piece of yoga philosophy is speaking to you right now as something that you want to share? And where is that coming from as the piece? Did you recently read something? Did you recently have an experience? Did you recently take a course or a workshop and it kind of brought it to the surface of your mind that, oh yeah, I forgot about that concept and I'd love to share on it? What is the particular, like I just went through a list of a number of different ones. So which one, which book, which concept, and what's the catalyst to having that be the thing you want to share about? And then the next thing is to remember, we just want one thing. In one class, we just want one thing to share. We're not going to go into class and share everything from the Bhagavad Gita or everything in the Yoga Sutras. That would be impossible. But this is oftentimes when teachers say to me, or when I went to this summit and I heard people saying, bringing more yoga philosophy into class, like that's such a global statement. And this is oftentimes where teachers go. They kind of have this perception that it has to be everything. I have to be an expert. No. You could spend the next week refreshing your memory from your 200-hour training about what are the yamas and the niyamas. Get yourself up to speed on that and pick one. Pick one yama or one niyama and go into class and speak about that. So that's the next step, is you're going to want to pick just one concept or topic. And then the last piece is, well, how am I actually going to share this? How am I actually going to share this? So this is where you've got a couple of options as far as I can see it for right now, that what I'll share with you here. You can share it in the beginning in a talk. You can share it in the end when they're in Shavasana, and you can share it throughout. Now you can do that in two different ways. You can do it one or the other, like share it at the beginning and then never talk about it again, share it at the end, and obviously teach a regular class with regular cueing up until that point, or sprinkle it throughout the entire sequence. If you do that, you want to think of ways to sprinkle it throughout so that it makes sense. So for instance, let's kind of go through these three options. Sharing it at the beginning of class most likely looks like you bring your students into class, you start to get them moving. Now, you could make the choice to start them out in some sort of relaxed position, and that's the position they're in when you're starting to share. This is the concept I wanted to bring up. Now, I'm not going to literally go into what you're literally going to say, but in this first example, we're talking about it at the beginning of class. So maybe you're moving them through a regular integration, regular beginning part of your sequence. And as they're moving, maybe you're saying something like, as you're moving on the mat right now, I want you to feel for, where do you feel stability? Where do you feel flexibility? This starts to bring up these fundamental concepts we read about in classical yoga text, sthira and sukha. And one refers to stability, one refers to flex, right? You're going to just weave it into an opening conversation. So you're kind of dripping into the class this theme. Now, of course, if you do the other scenario where you have them sitting on a block or have them in a pose where they're just relaxing, kind of like a pre-shavasana, they're not moving. And you're just giving like this little mini talk. People call it Dharma talk, right? It really depends what kind of teacher you want to be. Sometimes people like to get people moving straight away. Sometimes people don't mind so much starting people in a static position. So that's one idea. The last idea, or the third idea, is doing a similar thing at the end of class when they're in Shavasana. So that can sometimes feel a little easier because they're not looking at you, they're in a static position, i.e. Shavasana. So there's less moving parts, literally, and you can just focus on expressing yourself. The last way to do it is what I talked about before, sprinkling it throughout your sequence. This takes a little bit more work because you want it to be naturally woven in between the verbal, physical cues you're giving them. So again, let's say you were talking about, I don't know, resistance, or you were talking about stability, or you were, anything from any concept in even the Yoga Sutras, right? The first through fourth sutra talking about, the purpose of yoga is to calm the mind. The purpose of yoga is to settle the mind, that vritti, right? So you could, as people are moving through the sequence, you could start to question them. Where is your gaze? Where is your energy? Are you focusing? Like asking them inquiry questions that give you an opportunity to start to bring up these concepts. Did you know that the purpose of yoga, even though we're doing the poses, the purpose of yoga is really to calm the mind, not to judge it, not to get upset if your mind is going in a million different directions. It's more just to start to develop the discipline around calming the mind. As you're moving through the poses here, as you're holding this pose, are you feeling that the mind is more calm? So again, I'm not giving you literal words. I want it to come from you in a natural way. It's just that this method of sharing yoga philosophy in your classes is more of the interwoven method where you're sharing throughout the sequence a particular theme. I can't emphasize enough. Pick one, maybe two, like Sthira Sukha, they go together. Otherwise, if you don't have something that really goes together, like yin yang, right? Pick one thing. That will be more than enough for you, more than enough for them, and you'll be able to have a wonderful experience and sharing it with your students. So that's a little bit on how to share yoga philosophy in your classes. If this is something that you want to learn more about, please send me a DM on Instagram. Do it right now and let me know that is a topic of interest. And if I get enough interest, I will do a workshop on it. Okay, so we've come to the end of this episode. I want to share with you two things. Number one, if you haven't gotten my ebook yet, the Bare Bones Yoga Guide to Incredible Yoga Teaching, you must get it. You can get it right now on Instagram. Scroll over to my page, go to my profile, click the link. You'll see the link to the ebook is right there. It is free. I wrote it about 6 weeks ago. It's fresh, it's new. It's a compilation of my best practices around cueing, sequencing, mindset, and anatomy. So grab that ebook. It's really something I could charge for. I just wanted to make it free so it's accessible to anyone. And then the last thing is, if you are a yoga teacher who's done with a 200-hour training, you're out there teaching weekly classes, you're not in any other training right now, and you realize, like, there's a next level for me. I want to feel more confident, and I want to specifically learn how to share anatomy in my cues, how to build a sequence with a peak pose, how to move past and mindset blocks I have and really master my mindset so I can go into class and really truly feel confident. I want to walk around the room rather than have to bring notes. I want to walk around the room rather than have to practice with my class. I'm ready for a next level. I'm recording this in September, and I've mentioned this on prior episodes. I know my episodes are out there all the time, and you could be listening in any time of the year. However, if you are listening in September of 2024, I am offering an opportunity for you to enroll in an accelerator version of my program, which means you could be done in 30 days and achieve that transformation from where you are now to a teacher who's more confident and more able to do the walk and talk, share anatomy in their cues, build sequences with a peak pose, really truly feel like an expert. And you'll also get your certification and your CEU hours for Yoga Alliance. So you'll be able to check those two boxes as well. So all you need to do during this month of September 2024 is send me a DM on Instagram with the word September Accelerator, and I'll tell you all about it. So thank you so much for listening. If you're watching on YouTube, thank you for watching. If you're listening, why not hop over to YouTube and just check out what the podcast looks like, just to give yourself a taste of that as well. Thank you so much, and I'll talk to you on the next episode of Conversations for Yoga Teachers. Namaste.